I'm going to start with telling you a little bit from the core about who I am with a poem that some of you have heard, but it's called Cuba Lachen. I am from a place where roosters wake you up and chickens feed you breakfast. I am from a place where pigs are slaughtered with grit and grace, and every little bit is used for something. I am from a place where we feast on white rice, black beans, aguacates, and mojitos. I am from the bile of my mother's hatred of her wifely duties, from kneeling on pebbles on the bathroom floor, wishing that I could fly, and I have, and sometimes I still do. I am from a place where cafe accompanies cigars and visitors, where we give voice to Punto Guajero and worship the sound of la rumba. I am from the song of Celia Cruz. I am from the poetry of Martí. And I am from the song of Guantanamera, Guajira Guantanamera, Guantanamera, Guajira Guantanamera. I am a country girl from the mountains in Cuba. I am from water-gazing cleanses, bembes, and living altars, a place where we throw shells the same as dominoes, and where our African tongues are fueled by rum and conga drums. I am from a place where women traded veils for machine guns and lace for fatigues. I am from a place where mango trees swing orchids on their hips, and I am from the mountains and I am from the sea, a warrior like Chango, fearless like Ibatala, dressed in white and blue like Yemaya. I am from a place with worn mountains touched by heavens, and where hollers cradle tobacco, sorghum, and wild orchids. I was born on this mountain since I was my mother's daughter, and you can't just take my dreams away without me fighting. I am from a place where studying on it has nothing to do with reading, where coyotes serenade you while black barns play the fiddle. I am from a place where bless you little hearts accompanies criticism, and where we share the bounty of our gardens and the copperheads on our wood piles. I am from Appalachia all day long, but I am from Cuba at night. So, my goal was never to be a CEO or a professor. My goal has been to live a congruent and value-living life. And that is what I've done, and I am incredibly proud of that. Some of the ways that I have learned along the way has been inspired by the folks that I've worked with, who have allowed me to have an honor seat at their side while they were dying during the AIDS epidemic. I learned that if you had 3 months to live, you make very different decisions. So when I was ready to come home to Kentucky and find my rural roots again in this country, and I had to give up a private practice and a 10-year position in Miami, where all the Cubans and family were, to be able to live in a holler on a log cabin in Mount Vernon and learn that copperheads were not a hair color, and take a $40,000 cut in pay, I asked myself, if I had 3 months to live, would I do it? And I would, and I did, and I'm here. And I would have not been here if I hadn't made that decision. I often make lots of mistakes, and here are my strengths and weaknesses that continue to present challenges, problems, and incredible successes for me. I live in the vision, and I am very outcome-driven, but I am also very passionate and very opinionated. So sometimes, often, this really keeps me from truly listening, because I know what I want you to think, and I want you to agree with me. So I also have this huge, I tell my staff all the time, a butterfly net in my head, where I hold everything. I think this is from years of being a therapist. I'm also incredibly committed to change, but I'm very impatient with how long it takes for it to happen. So I strive very, very hard to be both an authentic leader. I have no choice about that. Everybody else's life is already taken, so I might as well just live mine. That's all I got. And a servant leader, a leader that is here to provide the resources, the wisdom, the structure, the experience, the knowledge, and the support for folks to do what they need to do, and for this community to be better, and for the world to be better. So that keeps me getting a lot more from my work than I give, and I give a lot. So I get very nurtured by the work that I do. I am very good at conceptualizing what is possible, and I value diverse voices at the table. And although that takes a lot of more time than usual, usually the solution is just so much better. So it's worth the time to do that. So here are some pivotal moments in my leadership story. At 8 years old, I walked into my favorite aunt's kitchen, and she was breastfeeding my new cousin. She had just gotten home from the hospital, and she had 2 black eyes and a broken jaw. And I asked her, why didn't she leave my uncle? And she said, because she couldn't afford to feed her kids. And I knew there was something really wrong with that. She ended up being killed 15 years later in that relationship. And here I am leading the Center for Women and Families. It is no coincidence, right? Another incredible shift was a huge paradigm shift in Cuba. I was 5 years old when the revolution happened. And what happened in Cuba was just another Latin American country, a puppet dictatorship, big gap between the lower class and the upper class with not much middle class. I called Cuba of those times the prostitute of the Antilles, because we went there to gamble, have sex, and drink. And that's what we did. And everybody loved going there. It was beautiful. That's what you saw. But really, there was an incredible amount of injustice. And people took to the mountains, everyday people, and a huge revolution happened. What also happened was that gender roles were totally shifted. Women was fighting right along with men wearing fatigues. And in the Museum of Natural History, the Museum of the Revolution in Cuba, there's a sign with women coming off La Sierra Maestra, big mountains after winning, saying, we'd rather be carrying machine guns than washing our men's underwear. So very early, I got the women's movement. Very early. So what also happened in Cuba, though, is that revolution became another dictatorship and another oppressive regime. It's just now, instead of the 3-piece suits, they wear fatigues. And there's still a huge gap between both. So there was a large betrayal there as well. But I was honored to be one of the first 1,000 volunteers. I was always been a school geek. School was where I thrived and got all my goodies. So I was, the revolution declared that Cuba had to have 100% literacy. And I became one of the first volunteers, one of the first 1,000 volunteers, went to school until noon, if you had a B or above. And then after that, the afternoon, you spent teaching people who didn't know how to read and write, farmers, sugar workers, tobacco makers, etc. And then I did that. And that really changed my life in a lot of ways. Another pivotal moment in my leadership was immigration and going from rural Cuba to New Jersey. Can you imagine that? I had a wonderful high school counselor who really, I was 4 years in this country, and I took the college entrance exams. And I scored really high. I was 3rd in my class. And I don't tell you that to brag. I just tell you, for an immigrant kid who didn't know English when she got here, that was huge. And of course, I wanted to go to college. I wanted to be the first college graduate in my family. Education was my way out of washing men's underwears and raising kids. So I knew education was the way out. And a wonderful school counselor named Mr. Chrome, I remember to this day, once he saw my scores, and I was applying to he said, what are you doing? I said, well, now I can apply to Montclair State. He said, well, let me talk to you about that. I really think you need to go to vocational school. Because what I know about Catholic Cuban girls is that they get pregnant and they don't finish school, as opposed to American girls who are taught that they need to go to college. So I want you to be able to, provide for your kids. I don't have any kids to this day, but he assumed I would. I was brokenhearted because he wasn't trying to hurt me. He was a good guy. This is what he thought my future was. He didn't have a vision that this Cuban kid from a ghetto in New Jersey, immigrant family, could actually go to college and make it. And every time I walk as a full professor down EKU, walking my students, I tell Mr. Crum, don't ever underestimate anyone, because you just never know where life will take you. Now, what I learned from that, and what I've also learned from my dad was an incredible man. My mom and dad both gave up their lives so that they can come to this country, work in a factory 12 hours a day, so that we would have a different life, the typical immigrant story. But my father really wanted the daughter that he wanted, which was somebody who got married, he had a 6th grade education. So for him, I had a doctorate when I graduated high school. So going to college was like, why would you do that? It's time to get married and have kids. So one of the painful places in my life is that in my dad's eye, what I and you think is success, which is college graduate, right? For my dad was a failure. And he died saying, this is our daughter. We brought her all the way to the United States so that she can get a doctorate in socialism. Because social work, social justice, and everything that I ever stood for, to him, was communism, really. He left everything for that, and here I was. So there was just that kind of divide and that gap. So what I learned from both my dad and Mr. Chrome is that even though people want their best for you, and they may have good advice, it is really important to discern the advice and see whether the advice fits you or not. And neither one of those fitted me. So that courage to live my life on my terms and to follow my compass is one of my greatest gifts. It's also what's brought me an incredible amount of resilience and an incredible amount of humility for the support I've gotten for living my life. Another major time in my life happened when I was doing my first social work practicum, and I was working with Vietnam vets at the University of Miami Jackson Hospital. And these men and some women were killing themselves a lot faster than we lost them in Vietnam. They were killing their families. They were just ravaged by trauma. And I learned trauma there. And I also met this amazing, short, wise man called Thich Nhat Hanh. If you do not know his work, please look him up. Thich Nhat Hanh is a Vietnamese monk who was tortured by the American military during the Vietnam War. And when he heard that the soldiers were killing themselves as a result of the war, he came to the United States to work with Vietnam vets. And his whole life has been dedicated to healing trauma and to creating peace in the world. And he is just an inspiration to me. And because of him, and his message, I was able to work not just with victims of trauma, but with perpetrators of trauma. And I worked for 7 years with perpetrators of domestic violence and sexual assault. Have to sit in a very different place in my heart to do that. But I figured if he could do that, I could do that. So looking for people who are doing the unthinkable has been something that has given me the courage to do what I don't think I'm capable of. When I was also worked with the Cuban Haitian refugee program, and I also was part of organizing the ERA march. Anybody remember the ERA, the Equal Rights Amendment? Yeah, we still don't have it, by the way. We're still making 80 some odd cents. You know the story, right? I was organizing the ERA march, and although the domestic violence shelters and the sexual assaults and the hotlines were really ran by a lot of women, strong feminist women, straight women, lesbians, etc., when the organizers of NOW were putting together the march, they asked the women who were lesbian not to hold hands at the march because they didn't want everybody to think that we were all lesbians. So the homophobia of that, when people were actually the ones running all of this, really got me. And in the Haitian-Cuban refugee, Cubans are very privileged. I'm a very privileged immigrant. We come in, we get a green card. We get a green card. Haitians were turned around to die at the sea in the poor boats that they came. Why? They were darker, they were poorer, they didn't have people here. We have very different immigration policy depending on who you are. So I got that systemic oppression and that societal space that depending on where you happen to sit would be where justice would be. So my social justice heart was really opened at that time. When I lived in Kentucky was another pivotal time. I moved to Mount Vernon, as I said, and I went to vote. And they asked me for my citizenship papers. Obviously my driver's license wasn't enough. And I don't tell you these things to say, oh, poor me. You know, I get up every day, I get offended regularly. If you're not offended every day, you're not living. This is just the way it is. Really, it is. So let's put your big girl panties on and move on, and, you know, that's what it is. So a song offends me, you know, whatever. So it's not like I'm telling you, oh, whatever. It's just the reality of my life, but it really changed things. And then I went ahead and was writing about it and ran into a fellow professor at EKU at the time, Frank X. Walker. How many of you know Frank X. Walker? And I was in his creative writing class just trying to put all this pain down, and he said, you know, you gotta tell other people about this. And I said, no, this is just for me, it's for my healing, you know, it's too private. And he said, you got it right. So he inducted me into the Afro-Latino Poets, and I'm a member of the Afro-Latino Poets with Frank and Bianca Spriggs and all of that. So it is a pretty important role model and space in my life. He has a poem called Statues of Liberty, and if you have not read that, it's pretty wonderful. So he said to me, you got to go public with this. And I tell you, I can talk to all of you and give a speech anytime, but you ask me to read my poetry, and I get nervous, and I get sick, and I get nauseous, because it's really your emotional underwear drawer. I'm sorry. It just really is. It is what it is. So let me tell you a little bit about the center and where I am right now. When I was at EKU for 17 years, and I loved the fact that I was teaching first-generation Appalachian students who had not left the county. Like me, no one in their family had a college degree. By the way, I have two nieces. One just graduated nursing school, and last year the other one graduated law school. So the cycle has been broken. Yeah. And this position came up. I had tenure. I was on a 9-month contract, right? Got summers off, sabbatical, went to Italy. That's how I got into the olive oil, because, of course, I'm a planner. I need a retirement career. So in 5 years, that's what I'm going to be doing. So, but I could go there for like a year at a time and live there in southern Italy and loved it and taught. And this job came up. And I went, you know what? This is not just a job. This is the center. This is the first domestic violence center in the state. It's one of the largest in the country, and has been doing this work for over 100 years. What an honor it would be if I was to be able to end my career in this amazing city, in this leadership position. And I threw my hat in the ring, and 3 months later I called and said, oh, sorry, man, we got too many, we haven't gotten to anybody yet. And then I get a call for an oral interview. And of course, I'm about the water and the oceans, and all. So I'm on vacation. Listen, if your work requires that your heart and soul is invested, self-care is a necessity, not a luxury. So I consider myself a self-care slut, because I don't think I would have lasted without massages, manicures, ocean, journaling, Thich Nhat Hanh. I couldn't do it. The Sisters of Loretto. It takes everybody. Therapist. It takes a village to keep me going. You know, this is. Yeah. It does. It does. So, and I'm not pretty when I'm not there. You know, I'm really become a micromanager and become really critical. And I get this like a little green slime coming down. And I said, so that's not done yet? Not pretty. So I tell my staff, if I start to micromanage you, get on yourself, know that I'm not in a good place. This is what you can say to me. I'm sorry that that you have so much on your plate. Is there anything I can do to help? The code line for that is, you're really getting in my stuff. Get out of it. You have no business here. I got it. Go take care of yourself. So my staff knows that so that they don't think that they're crazy. I'm nuts. They're not crazy, I'm nuts. And that's where I go when I don't do all those things. And I've been there a lot lately. So this is another pivotal time in my leadership. I've really felt good about the work that I had done, building structures, getting to know the community, putting in infrastructure where I thought was needed, getting board buy-in on lots of different ways of doing our work, trying to get some trust from my staff so that they could know that they could do what they needed to do and be part of leading the organization, not just the front line. And then I had about 3 months of really good stuff. I even started to date. I had time, you know. I started to go to the movies. I just felt really good. And then the tsunami happened. What happened was our largest and newest facility on 2nd Street had roof problems for quite a while, which we did not know. The renovation was done. It was done really well, except not a lot of work was done on the roof. And when this winter happened, the perfect storm happened. As drains froze, the exposure to the fact that there had been water in the roof about 4 inches since 2006. All of that began to leak through the doors. And on December 24th, I had to close 14 shelter rooms. My staff had to tell people who were at threat of getting killed that we could not accept someone in the shelter. And I think that broke us. It broke me and it broke all of us. The next piece, as this tsunami began to evolve, was to realize that I had to evacuate all of the staff and all of the clients, all of the kids, all of the pets, and find alternative safe spaces for people to be while we figured out not only what was wrong with the building, but how can we rebuild. The good news is that everyone is somewhere. Some of the places I can't tell you because of safety issues, but they're somewhere safe, staff, clients, and not 1 minute of service was interrupted. Now that's my staff. Those are the advocates. Those are the frontline people. Those are the leadership team who divided up. We must have seen 100 places to see where we could go. We're now in 10 different places. And let me tell you, I have arrived. My office is right across the Pussycat Lounge on Poplar Road. And if you don't believe it, I have a red bar right there just in case. Just in case I have an opportunity to either recruit somebody who's been in human traffic or a fundraiser. I don't know what's going to happen. I am now, all of us are now going through the birth canal, myself included. As a leader, I've never felt more vulnerable. I've never felt like I needed people more. I need experts in roofing. I need experts in architecture. I need a good board chair who on a Sunday afternoon, I'd call and say, I'm fighting in Frankfurt and all this stuff is coming because we need state money. And she said, have you considered withdrawing your request? And of course, a warrior like me would never consider withdrawing your request for $500,000 from the state. They need to help us. But I knew she was right, and the minute she said it, I got such relief. Surrender of this battle was necessary for the bigger one coming along. But I wouldn't have been able to see that unless she was able to say that to me, and unless I had called. So one of the gifts right now is that self-sufficiency is overrated, and that is a pretty arrogant place to be where you this much need. So I don't feel alone with this. I feel like I have community partners who are always trying to help. I feel like I have a staff doing the best they can. I feel like I have a board who really has our back. And I feel like we have an expert facilities committee. I don't know anything about roof, ma'am. They didn't teach me that in social work school and CEO school. But I have people who do, and I'm learning to rely on that. So I think my last vestige of self-sufficiency is really being transformed at this time. So where we are now is that we are in different places. The 2nd Street location is being renovated beginning June 1st, and we need your help. We need everybody's help in order for us to rebuild and renew the center. I also live by crisis is an opportunity. So this crisis has given us the opportunity to re-envision our work, re-envision our environment, deepen our relationship and trust with partners and with boards. And I believe that when we're out of the birth canal, that we will come out at a much better place. Certainly I'm more challenged than I've ever been. Certainly I am, my soul is tired because this work is very personal for me. And the burden is huge because people come to us when they're at risk of getting killed. And that's not, I don't take that lightly. That means a lot. So the center started with one leaky room at the YWCA 100 years ago. We're now big and have one leaky building. But our clients are resistant, our clients are resilient, and you know, the center is resilient. And I certainly, when I came to the center, they said to me, so are you the new sheriff in town? And I said, no, I'm the new midwife in town. And that's really my leadership story. I really believe that I'm here to pressure. I'm here to ask you to push. I'm here to remind you that you know you cannot change your mind and get off the table right now. I'm sorry. We're in the middle of this. Cannot do that. So I'm going to close so that you have time at your tables for discussion with a poem that talk about authenticity. When I came, first week, they said, Marta, you have to write a welcome letter from the president to the clients. And it's sort of like, okay, you're coming in with broken bones, everything you own on your back, you know, and you're going to get a hi, welcome to the Center for Women and Families. We provide economic success program. We provide housing. That didn't feel right to me. It didn't feel right. So at 3 o'clock in the morning on my 3rd week, I woke up and I wrote this, which is the welcome to the center. It's called The Journey. Welcome. Your courage has walked you here. Your desperation has fueled your pace. Your suffering has paved your way. Your wisdom will guide your steps. And your wounds will remind you of the why. And your sisters and brothers will show you how. The swelling in your aching muscles nudges your brain out of oblivion. The nausea in your gut rises to your throat. Your coughing carries you back to consciousness. Your spirit will remember your power. Your eyes will eventually open. Your thirst for freedom will awaken your creative thoughts. Your passion will rebirth your spontaneity. Your knowing will remind you that love does not hurt and that safety and respect are not negotiable. The beating of your heart will cleanse your fears. Your body will heal. Your soul will eventually stop sobbing, and your laughter will be a witness to life. Later on, when you are ready, you will bring hope to another survivor who still does not know that they too have options. Now, find your voice, whisper until you can shout, I am safe. Claim your space. Your life begins anew. Welcome home and meet your glorious self. Thank you.